The high-stakes summit is now just a few hours away. The president says he's going to feel out whether Putin is open to peace. The president acknowledges the talks could fail, but says he hopes they spur a follow-up meeting, which would include Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Here's the president just a few minutes ago on Air Force One.
He's bringing a lot of business people from Russia, and that's good. I like that because they want to do business, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled.
You had said earlier this week that Putin would face severe consequences if you get the sense from him that he's not interested. What do you mean by that?
Economically severe. Yes, it will be very severe. I'm not doing this for my health, okay? I don't need it. I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives. Yeah, very severe.
Peter Doocy is in Anchorage, Alaska. He can do a preview for us. It's still dark there, Peter.
Sun's coming up, though. Sun's not down for very long here in Alaska, we learned since we arrived, Dana. And we had a chance to talk to President Trump this morning very briefly while he was making his way to Air Force One. And he's saying there could be some surprises out of this summit today, but that his number one objective is to save lives. And so there's all these Russian businessmen who are already here or who are arriving later on with the delegation who would love to start doing business in the United States, in Alaska, particularly with rare earth minerals. And it could happen soon, but not until Putin pulls out of Ukraine.
We have the hottest country, and he wants a piece of that because his country is not hot economically. In fact, it's the opposite. And China's not doing well economically, but we're all, look, I want everybody to do well. The war's got to stop and the killing's got to stop.
Another Nobel Peace Prize nomination could soon be in the cards for President Trump from Hillary Clinton. She told Jessica Tarlov in a podcast interview, honestly, if he could bring about the end to this terrible war, if he could end it without putting Ukraine in a position where it had to concede its territory to the aggressor, could really stand up to Putin, something we haven't seen. Maybe this is the opportunity. If President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize because my goal here is not to allow capitulation to Putin. Same for Trump, who does admit this meeting might not work.
I'm not here to negotiate for Ukraine. I'm here to get them at a table, and I think you have two sides. Look, Vladimir Putin wanted to take all of Ukraine. If I wasn't president, he would right now be taking all of Ukraine, but he's not going to do it.
And as President Trump sits on Air Force One, heading to Alaska, and surveys the last couple of months and global conflicts that he and his team have had a hand in ending, he sees some wars where people were fighting with machetes, some wars where people were threatening to use nuclear weapons. But this peace has been the most elusive, and today is the biggest step that either U.S. President Joe Biden or Donald Trump has taken towards that peace since the war broke out 3 years ago. Dana?
Peter, could I just ask you a couple of logistical questions? So this afternoon, they'll have a meeting. I don't know how long that's going to last. And then the president yesterday on Brian Kilmeade's radio show said there will be a press conference, but he does not know if Putin will be a part of that.
And we've heard from the public comments that White House officials have been making that depending on how the summit goes, the plan is for Vladimir Putin to stand there and answer questions next to Donald Trump. And so that's something we have not seen since the first Trump term. It didn't happen at any point during Biden's administration. And in fact, when we were with him in Geneva 3 years ago for the summit in June 2021 with Putin and Biden had separate press conferences. That was the one where Joe Biden famously gave Putin a list of critical infrastructure and asked Putin please not to hack it in the United States. They had separate press conferences. The plan is, the aspiration here is for them to have a joint press conference, but a lot has to happen for that to happen. And President Trump says if Putin's not there, he'll still probably talk anyway.
All right, Peter Doocy, thank you so much. We'll get this day underway.
So, Dana, a bit of an explainer on the map behind us, a bit of history, too. Let's go back 11 years to 2014, all right? Capital city of Kyiv here. This is under President Obama when Putin first went into the southeastern part of Ukraine. He took all of Crimea and the peninsula here and most of the Donbass region. Now we go to 2022 under Joe Biden, okay? This is when the invasion happens in February third week of 2022. This is how far Russia expanded into Ukraine at that time. 3 years later, this is what the battlefield looks like. Ukraine pushed past in the north and the northeast and here in the south as well, and Russia has held on to the parts here in red. What could be negotiated if you start to get into a land for peace deal? What could possibly be on the table? What would the Ukrainians agree to? All right, in Luhansk, this first region, the Russians occupy almost 100% of it. In Donetsk, it's about 3/4, same for Zaporizhia, and then Kherson down here about 70%. Here and here and here is what has been talked about. Crimea, they haven't sacrificed anything. They still control it 100% going back 11 years. I want to bring in Marc Thiessen to talk about this now. Mark, listen to Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. We believe he will be in the room today with Putin and Trump and his Russian counterpart.
This war has been going on for 3.5 years now. It was a war that started under the previous administration. The president's inherited that, and he's trying to do now what he can to bring it to an end. But even as I speak, even as we talk here now, there are changes happening in the battlefield which have an impact on what one side views as leverage or the other. So that's the reality of ongoing fighting, which is why a ceasefire is so critical.
Now, that was yesterday, this is today. Mark, do you see a best case scenario? Do you see a best case outcome for today?
Well, the best case scenario is that Putin's willing to deal and willing to give up territory in a deal. But, you know, here's the thing. You heard Donald Trump say, look, I don't need this. Vladimir Putin is the one who asked for this meeting. So he better be coming to the table willing to make concessions, because if he dragged Donald Trump 7 hours across the continent all the way to Alaska to not make any concessions and not end this war, this may end up being much worse for Vladimir Putin than it would have been if he never asked for the meeting to begin with. Because he's wasting if he doesn't make concessions, if he's not willing to end the war, if he's not willing to do that, he's wasting Donald Trump's time. And Donald Trump may bring the hammer on him. The reason they're having this meeting is because Putin knew that Donald Trump was going to bring the economic hammer down in Russia. The only thing that's keeping the Russian economy afloat is oil. Donald Trump drove Iranian oil and gas from the global market in his first term. He was getting ready to do the same thing to Russia. He had already brought sanctions on secondary tariffs on India, and he was about to do it on China to shut down their oil sales. And Putin is desperate to stop that from happening. And so let's see if he makes a deal.
Mark, you wrote a piece in your column in the Washington Post, and the headline is How Trump Can Win at the Alaska Summit. And I'll read just a little bit from that and get your take on it, saying that telling Mr. Putin that the West will capitalize on Russia's economic and financial vulnerabilities while expanding assistance to Ukraine may push the Russian leader to consider an alternative strategy to ultimatums and stonewalling. But one thing I've been paying attention to as I talk to folks this week is that Russia has made some serious gains in the last month. Does Putin come to this feeling like he's not got the upper hand, but that he's got cards to play?
Well, if he thinks he has the upper hand, he's sadly mistaken, because his economy is teetering on the brink. They've got double-digit inflation. They've got labor shortages. There are literally in Russia right now, there are armed robberies to steal butter from grocery stores so they can resell it on the black market. That's how bad the Russian economy is. He's running out of armor. They're not going to have any tanks left. He's in deep trouble. But I don't know that he's coming in with that attitude. You know, I don't know if you saw this, but Lavrov showed up in Alaska wearing a USSR sweatshirt that said CCCP across the front of it. That was intentional. That's sending a signal that they have not given up on their goal of restoring the borders of the old Soviet Empire. And so if that's the attitude they're bringing, they're going to get hit pretty hard coming out of this summit.
So here is another possibility. The rare earth minerals could be negotiated. Maybe. That's what we're hearing. Here was the question this week. Hang on. Number 4.
Yeah.
Do you plan to offer him access to that at all?
We have great rare earth. We made that as payment for all of the money that we've spent so foolishly in Ukraine. We spent $350 billion. Now, Europe spent $1 billion, but we are spending a lot of time trying to get the war solved. If we can get the war solved, we'll be very happy. As far as rare earth, that's very unimportant relative. I'm trying to save lives.
That would be a deal between the U.S. and Russia. However, the tricky part in all of this is that the Ukrainian government has to approve anything that Putin and Trump lay out. And that could take some time, Mark. How do you see that developing now?
Yeah, so first of all, on the rare earths, Trump negotiated a rare earth deal with Ukraine. One of the interesting things is that the land that Putin is asking for actually contains a lot of uranium and rare earths that we're supposed to get in the deal with Ukraine. So why would the U.S. want to give that up? Number one. Number two, every time Trump is asked about this, Putin is coming with, I want to do arms control with you. I want to do economic deals with you. I want to do rare earths deals from you. And all Trump says is, let's end the war, then we can talk about all that. So if Putin thinks he's going to come out dangling a shiny object in front of Donald Trump, he didn't read the art of the deal. Trump is focused on one thing, ending the war, stopping the killing, stopping the death. And if Putin thinks he's going to trick him into allowing him to continue the war with some rare earth deals, there's a lot of places we can get rare earths, including Ukraine. We don't need it as rare earths.
Okay. All right, Marc, you're the first up today, and a long line of folks will be analyzing this. Thank you, Marc. Marc Thiessen there.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.